Hello and welcome to the 5 Yard Dynasty podcast. Hope you're all doing well. Liam, how you doing? It felt a bit weird having no football this week, I'll be honest.
It was weird, and let's face it, the Pro Bowl is not football. It just isn't. It's awful.
Didn't even watch a play.
Nor did I. I watched some of the competitions. I like those. They're quite fun. But I'm not watching a game where no one really wants to play because they don't want to get injured and ruin their livelihood.
Yeah. I gave up with it probably 5 or 6 years ago. I just refuse to watch any of the stuff now. But yeah, if you're joining us live, we teased a special guest last week, and we do have a special guest joining us. We're going to break this pod down into 2 parts, so you're going to get unfortunately have to put up with Liam and I for the first half, and then in the second half we'll be joined by a very special guest. But Liam, let's not leave the taste buds of our listeners lingering anymore. Have you got a cocktail of the week?
I do. So this is my own take on an orange fizz. I don't know how well you can see that. I'm not using a normal.
You got a new glass as well.
I'm using a different glass because, as I told you pre-show, Rich, the one that I was washing up snapped in my hands in the washing up bowl, so I had to clean that up real quick, and it was a real rush to get back to the show. Anyway, all it is gin, lemon juice, orange juice, and a bit of tango I put in there, so it's fizzy orange, whatever you want. So it is just alcoholic orange juice, but it does taste pretty nice.
So that's just a screwdriver, isn't it? You're calling it orange fizz, isn't that a screwdriver? Orange juice and vodka is a screwdriver, isn't it?
I was about to say it's still.
Yeah, but I was going to make a joke and say that the reason your glass broke was because you were calling it a glass, not a glass. You know?
Oh, here we go.
If you'd have named it correctly, then it wouldn't have broken in your hands.
Let's move on, because we're gonna spark a northern-southern debate, and the American listeners are gonna have no idea what we're talking about.
It's fine. All you got to know is that I speak properly and Liam doesn't. So
anyway, there's no R in glass, is there? There's no R.
Let's move on. Let's move on. So today we're going to talk through some of our favourite Dynasty buy candidates. We've each got 2. Before our special guest later, we'll tease you with 3 of his. Liam, who's your first Dynasty buy?
So I'm going to go a little bit of a deeper dive than what you've done. And yes, that is a little bit of a dig.
Shots fired already.
I've got to start it off, because if I don't get in there first, you are, and I've just got to get in there. So I'm going to go off with Libiscus Chanel. Now, his sophomore year was not what many hoped it would be. I mean, let's face it, the Jaguars were not what people hoped they were. But Visca, he only improved on his yardage total by 18 yards from his rookie years, from the previous year, 2020. But Rich, I want to get your take on Visca, because when we're talking about dynasty buys, I always think of who can I get that I like the value of, not necessarily who is a dynasty buy because they're performing at the top level. So say Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson. But I prefer my dynasty buys to be someone that I prefer their value to increase over the next year, say. So with Visca, I can really see that happening. He's had 600 plus yards in both of his seasons in the NFL. He was in the worst passing offense, and the worst offense in general, but the worst passing offense in the league in 2021. They scored, I believe it was 11 passing touchdowns and threw 17 interceptions. So I'm just going to leave that up to you, and I want to get your take before I take a bit more of a deep dive into why I've chosen him.
I think I've never really been a Visca guy. I'll be honest, last year, whenever he was getting kind of hyped up about potentially DJ Chark and Visca, and I've just never really got it. I think the potential is there. I think the ability to be used as a movable piece is fantastic. He was pretty decent in my rookie model. He was a 85th percentile prospect, which puts him between Brandon Ayuk and T. Higgins. So pretty decent level in terms of where he sits there. But I've just never wanted to pay the price. I think he was overhyped because of his potential movability and kind of flexibility without that offense. So I've never really been a true believer. At his current price, so he's wide receiver 51 in current ADP. That's, we've talked about this a lot. That's a position where I'm just not drafting wide receivers. Anything outside of probably the top 40 receivers or my top 40 receivers, I don't really want a roster, if I'm being honest. I'd much rather, at that point in the draft, just take a punt on any and all of the running backs. I just think that he's a bit of a tease, and I'm not sure he's ever going to put it together. I'm not sure by the time that offense starts to put it together, he'll still be around, if I'm being honest. He's got 2 years left on his rookie contract, and I kind of feel like that's such a dire situation in Jacksonville that by the time that offense starts to function properly, Visca's probably going to be in his last year of the deal and potentially moving out. And that's before we've even mentioned the fact that, I know it's a new offensive scheme, I know it's a new head coach and offensive coordinator, but obviously they spent a first-round pick last year on Travis Etienne, who was supposed to be this hybrid player, this movable piece, and I just don't know if there's enough room to go around for both of them. So so I'm not a believer in Chanel. I think he's my wide receiver 53. I've got him valued at kind of a mid-second, I think is pretty much what I'd pay right now. But I'm all ears. I'm very keen to hear why you think I'm all wrong.
So I am just trying to get up the wide receiver contracts for next year for Jacksonville, but I pulled a couple of stats for you because I know you love these probably aren't obscure stats, but they're still a bit more of a deep dive than looking at the sleeper career tab on a player's profile. So last year he had 18% of the receiving yards. He was 1 target off 100 targets. He had a 16% target share in that offense, and he had an 18% reception share. To me, a player with that much involvement in an offense is crazy value at the wide receiver. What was it, 50 plus?
Yeah, I'd counter that by saying he had all of that last year. So he had almost 100 targets, and he was the wide receiver 75 in points per game.
Okay, how many touchdowns did he score last year?
No idea. Not got it in front of me. I'm sure he'll tell me.
0.
Okay.
He didn't score a touchdown, and they scored 11 touchdowns as a passing offense on the year. They scored the least touchdowns by the passing game, and they scored the 31st least or 31st most, so second worst offense in total touchdowns scored. To me, that offense is going to get better regardless of what happens next year. I don't see how Libiscus Chanel can have a worse season than what he did this year, and tied to a rookie quarterback for 2 more years. I'd take that.
If you gave Visca a touchdown a game, so 17 touchdowns last year, which we both agree would be unprecedented and slightly ridiculous,
incredible, yeah.
Where do you reckon he'd have finished last year if he'd have scored 17 touchdowns in points per game?
Because you're bringing this up, it's not going to go too high. So let's go wide receiver 38.
A little bit better than that. He'd have finished as the wide receiver 25. So even if he'd have scored a touchdown in every single game, he still wouldn't have been a top 24 receiver. I love the potential, and I get at his current price, I get the idea of taking a punt, but it's I'd rather at that cost go and buy a running back, to be honest.
The other thing I was going to say is not that I'd expect them to do it. Marvin Jones has about 3 to 4 mil savings, and DJ Chark's out the window. He's gone unless they bring him back in free agency. So that offense kind of widens up a little bit. Yes, I'd expect wide receivers to come in during the offseason, but I think I could argue Visca all day with you, Rich. So shall we just move on to your first play for Dynasty buys?
Sounds good to me. So sticking with the young wide receiver trend, my Dynasty buy is going to be Devonta Smith. I think, there's a lot of talk about now is the time to get in on those elites, kind of rookie / sophomore, depending on how you're wording them, wide receivers. Obviously Jamar Chase, Elijah Moore, to an extent Jalen Waddle. They're all being massively hyped up, and I think if you listen to or go and read anything, those are the probably the 3 hottest names that anybody is talking about right now. I'd potentially argue that Devonta Smith needs to be in that kind of consideration. I think that he didn't have the year we'd all hoped. I think that we can put a lot of that down to offensive scheme and quarterback and play calling and that side of things. But I really believe in the talent. This is a guy that's a Heisman Trophy winner. He is a 97th percentile prospect in my model. The only receivers that are ahead of him in the last 3 years are Jamar Chase and CeeDee Lamb. Yes, that puts him ahead of Justin Jefferson and Jerry Jeudy. I truly believe that he is an elite talent. The one question mark we had about him coming out was his size and whether he'd be able to kind of play across an entire season and stay healthy. Well, he played 16 games. I really, truly believe that Devonta Smith has got top 12 wide receiver upside. I think that offense will take a step forward this year. I think in year 2, I think Jalen Hurts will be the quarterback again. And I really think that passing volume will still be there, if not a bit more. I think he's going to rush the same amount, but I believe the offense as a whole is going to improve. And I really think that Devonta Smith is going to be the number 1 target on that offense. And I think that at the moment, he's kind of getting forgotten about because it feels like we're getting Elijah Moore, Jalen Waddle, Jamar Chase as these overhyped rookie wide receivers. And I think that Devonta Smith is kind of the name that I'm going out and certainly inquiring about now. I'd also throw Rashad Bateman in this category. I think that he's certainly flashed last year, and I'm very high on him. But yeah, I'm very keen and very excited to see where Devonta Smith could end up next year.
No, I love that pick, Rich. I've been thinking about Devonta Smith in all of the startups. I say all 2 of them so far this season. And yeah, as you said, he's completely undervalued at the moment, and I don't understand why. The only thing I can really chalk it up to is he was a first-round pick, a top 10 pick at that in the NFL draft. He was probably taken in the first round of your rookie draft, so people were kind of expecting production, or people were worried about the weight, because that was the main worry coming out of college, was he's 170. So maybe people just haven't got over that and still think he's not going to do well. I mean, he broke the Eagles wide receiver receiving yard record in the 17-game season. He played for not very many of those snaps.
Is that rookie? Because
I believe so.
Because he didn't have that many yards.
916. I'm pretty sure he did, because he went in for a very limited amount of snaps to get the record in the last game of the season and then sat.
They must have had a 1,000-yard receiver. What about
Not
Alshon
even
Jeffrey
rookie.
and that's that's what I'm saying. So was it a
As a
rookie
rookie.
record?
Yeah, that's a rookie record. Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were saying it was an all-time. I was like,
no,
definitely had a thousand receiver.
no.
Oh, sorry, that's me mishearing.
Rookie. He played 19% of snaps against Dallas in week 18 because he just went in, got the 40-odd yards that he needed, and then sat the rest of the game. So he basically ran for or received 900 yards through 16 games. As a rookie, we would expect that to be really good production, but I just don't think the value's caught up with him at the moment. In a recent startup I've done, 12-team Superflex, he went in the 5th, and the team that took him are building really young. They've got like T. Higgins, Waddle. They went really young. So, yeah, I just love the value at the moment. Talking about value though, Rich, what would you pay for him right now in terms of 2021 picks or 2022 picks? Sorry.
So 2022 picks. If we're talking Superflex, so I have got him valued currently around the 104. I'd have him above the 104 in a startup right now. So I guess what I'm saying is I'd trade the 101, 102, 103 for him. I'd trade him for the top 3 pick in a Superflex, or I'd rather have him over any other first. In terms of if we're talking kind of random picks, I value him around a kind of random future first and a second, maybe a first and 2 seconds, something like that. He's my wide receiver 14 currently. So I've got him ahead of Chris Godwin, Terry McLaurin, Keenan Allen, Mark Evans. I'd have him over all those guys right now.
Yeah, I've got him over all of them as well. So I think we're both equally as high on this one. Let's move on to my pick because I want to talk a little bit more, Rich. So I'm going to go with Juju Smith-Schuster, and without trying to sound like a broken record, because I was really on him last year and then he got injured. He's still really young and he's 25 years old, right? He's had top 24 production 3 times in his career. He's been the wide receiver 8. Yes, that was in 2018 with Antonio Brown still there in Pittsburgh. But I really like the way that this guy plays. My biggest concern for him is he's becoming a free agent. But currently at cost, recent startup that I did, he went in the 10th round, start of the 10th round, over Mike Williams, but behind Devin Singletary, Leonard Fournette in the 9th, Hunter Renfrow, Jerry Jeudy, Chase Claypool. I'm not a huge fan of Chase Claypool. I'd take Juju over him every day of the week. I just think that he's a massive value, and people, because he's been in the league for 5 years, think that he is older than he is. Rich, am I just getting enamored by my Juju love from last year, or are you on the same lines as me? Just more as a value that's going to rise pick rather than expecting him to be a top 10 wide receiver this year?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of question marks around what's going to happen with obviously where he's going to land and that side of things. It's hard not to really, quite frankly, like the value at the moment. As you said, he's got potentially elite upside. If he ends up in somewhere like a Kansas City or something like that, his price is going to skyrocket. I'm a big Juju guy. I've always been a big Juju guy. Sometimes to my own detriment. I did write him up once he got injured in the middle of the season in my weekly article as a must buy, because I thought you could buy that injury dip in terms of his price. The fact he's going as wide receiver 40 in current ADP is certainly eye opening. I think that's a bargain, quite frankly. It's just a price, because I think that for me, I'd be happy paying a mid to late first. In a super flex league, I'd value him around sort of the 110. But in a couple of leagues I'm in where I don't own him, I've asked around prices and I'm getting quoted obscene prices. It feels like he's one of these guys that people either love or hate. And I think that those that love him obviously value him pretty high. I think his value is very wide-reaching.
So in this startup that I'm doing at the moment, he went 2 picks after the 201, a rookie pick 201. So to me, I would pay the 201 for him every day of the week. But again, I think that's a bit of my Juju bias from last year, hoping that he kind of does what I expected him to do this year. I think the thing that people really think about with free agents is, oh, we don't know where they're going, so it's a huge risk. And to an extent, it is. But there's also that huge upside of, as you said, if he goes to a top offense like a Kansas City, for example, that's a huge upgrade and a huge instant value boost. So even if you take him then and then sell him when he gets signed by the Chiefs or someone like that, and if he doesn't get signed by the Chiefs, you can still hold him until he starts playing, because he'll do better than what he's done over the past 2 years when he's been injured, had Big Ben, nude arm, Big Ben throw into him. I mean, just looking at his stats, he had an awful game against the Packers, which was the last full game that he played. But I remember watching that game, and Big Ben missed him on 2 big, wide open touchdown, long, deep balls. If they were connected, they were going straight to the house, both of them. And I think if he goes anywhere to a competent quarterback, I think not the sky's the limit, but I think he's going to get back into that top 24 range, and he'll be turning 26. So you can't really ask for a younger wide receiver at the 10th, 11th round.
It really annoys me when people say, oh, but he's a free agent, as a negative. Because to me, if his price is decreased because he's a free agent, as you said, that's a fantastic buy opportunity. Okay, if we're to sit here and talk about potential free agent landing spots, and yes, we can throw out, dream landing spots, but in terms of a landing spot, is there any wide receiver core where he's going to face more competition than Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool? Pat Freiermuth, Najee Harris got a decent amount of targets. Is there any quarterback that is going to be worse for him next year than Big Ben has been the last 2 years?
Depending on who you ask, Jimmy G, but I'm not on that train. But yeah, I get what you're saying, that there aren't many quarterbacks that are going to be worse for him. Is
there going to be an offense that is going to be worse for him? Wherever he goes, and he's going to get to pick where he goes, they're going to make him a featured part of the offense because they're going to pay him, 10, 15 million a year. I just don't see a world in which he's walking into a situation worse than Pittsburgh, and yet people are knocking him because he's going to leave Pittsburgh. And it just, it feels like we're talking outside the both sides of our mouths in terms of saying, oh, we're knocking him because he's a potential free agent. Oh, but Pittsburgh is an awful situation. It's like, yeah, okay, so we're either he's going to get a better situation in free agency, or we should be valuing him more as a Steeler. And I just can't get my head around it. So yeah, I agree with you. I think I've seemed to have always been above consensus on Juju. I think he's my wide receiver 31 at the moment. As I said, he's going wide receiver 40 in ADP, so obviously there's a decent discrepancy there. I disagree with your Visca pick, but yeah, I agree with you on Juju.
I'm glad I salvaged it in the end.
Good stuff. So my final pick then, Liam. I feel like we've talked a lot about a lot of players this year. I've rubbed in, some salt in the wounds around certain players that are probably going to be leaving Green Bay. But I feel like I've not mentioned the fact that Aaron Rodgers could well be leaving Green Bay enough. So I thought, what better? Let's highlight him again on this week's pod. So look, I sit here and I say it constantly. Age is the most overrated aspect of quarterback play in Dynasty. It is absolutely ridiculous how we're so quick to move on to these next shiny new young quarterback that we forget that we've got a guy that's, coming off yet another MVP season and is just churning out fantasy points for fun. And I don't think he's going anywhere. I think in terms of retiring for the foreseeable future, right? If the price you can get on him at the moment is decreased because people think that he's going to retire, then I'm absolutely buying that all day. He's currently QB 10 in ADP. This is a guy that was the QB 5 this year. I can't get my head around how you can sit here and say, I'd rather 3 years of Trevor Lawrence over Aaron Rodgers. And I get that people are listening and going, oh, but Aaron Rodgers you only get for 3 years, whereas Trevor Lawrence you'll get for the next 20. Well, based on how Trevor Lawrence played last year, is there any guarantee that he's going to be starting quarterback in Jacksonville in 4 years' time? Yes, I get that he's, the most incredible prospect we've had since Andrew Luck and blah, blah, blah. But we see it time and time again. We bring in these young quarterbacks. They show some flashes. We overhype them, and then they don't produce. Remember, Baker Mayfield was the QB 3 in ADP after his rookie season. We overhype these young quarterbacks time and time again. Give me Aaron Rodgers for the next 3 years over plenty of other quarterbacks. I think for me, I've got an Elite 7. I think it's Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert, Joe Burrow, and Dak Prescott. After that 7, if you're picking any other person other than Aaron Rodgers, I'd be intrigued to hear your argument, because I don't think there's a sensible argument that you can make. And no, I can have Trevor Lawrence for the next 20 years isn't a sensible argument.
I mean, just following on from that point, how many dynasty leagues go for 20 years? Realistically, if
few.
it's not a home league where you all know each other, you meet up every year for a draft, and I just don't see it happening.
It's interesting, Liam, that you say how many leagues go for 20 years, because obviously you not being 20 years old, obviously you've not got a dynasty league that's 20 years long.
Well, I've been a part of too many dynasty leagues and seen enough of them folded already. But that might have been just people being startup happy during COVID, not having anything to do. But back onto Aaron Rodgers, I surprise, the Green Bay fan agrees with you on Aaron Rodgers being great. I think at the moment people really undervalue or overvalue age in terms of being young, and undervalue the older quarterbacks because of that, as you said. Again, I'm just referring back to the dynasty startup I'm doing at the moment. After the Elite 7, they all went off in very similar order to what you mentioned. We had Trey Lance as the QB8, Stafford QB 9, Lawrence as the QB 10, Fields as the QB 11, Russ 12, Hurts 13, Mac Jones 14, which the guy that took him is a massive Mac Jones fan. So Tua as the 15, and then Rodgers as the 16. To me, if I can get Aaron Rodgers as a QB 16 is insane.
I'm absolutely gobsmacked. Someone took Mac Jones ahead of Aaron Rodgers.
He's a massive Mac Jones fan, but yes, wow. I'm not saying that's going to happen every draft, but what I'm saying is that is absolutely insane that you can get Aaron Rodgers as QB 16. I don't care what the other 7, 8 quarterbacks going in front of him are. If I can get him QB 16 prices for the next 3 years, I'm taking that every day of the week. It's just insane to me.
I love the potential of Trey Lance. I love the potential of Justin Fields. But would we be shocked if they were on the scrap heap in 2-3 years' time? We see it time and time again. 50% of these rookie quarterbacks fail. Yet we're holding up Justin Fields, Trey Lance, Trevor Lawrence. They're all like QB1s and, Mac Jones, apparently, according to that startup. Like, how you're drafting those guys ahead of Aaron Rodgers, I just don't get it. And I think that, yes, I'm all about building long term and trying to build a dynasty and trying to, compete for multiple years. But I just think you're doing it wrong if you're looking at it and you're saying, but my quarterback's 22, 23. But it's like, yeah, but what is he going to produce? It's like, yes, if Trey Lance turns into what we hope Trey Lance could be, then incredible. He'll be a solid QB1 for multiple years. But what if there's a reason why he couldn't beat out Jimmy G? What if he doesn't turn into what we all hope? And, I'm speaking as an optimist here. We hope Trey Lance is going to be a fantastic quarterback for fantasy. But what happens if he doesn't have that elite accuracy that we hope? Yes, he's got the arm strength. Yes, he's got the rushing ability. But what happens if he can't sustain drives because he can't complete passes? And, you're left holding the bag over some proposed youth. Whereas for me, if I can get Aaron Rodgers, who, as I said, was a top 5 quarterback again this year, that's despite missing games, didn't he? He missed 1-2 games.
No, he never missed a game last year.
Yeah, he did. He had COVID, didn't he? So he definitely missed
one.
Oh,
yes, he missed one. Sorry, I'm looking at it and it says 16, so I just thought nothing of it. Yeah, he did miss one last year, and he's still the QB6.
Yeah, well, there you go. So it's, to me, it's ridiculous. He is an elite quarterback. I do not believe any of the rumors that he's retiring. I cannot believe that he's disappearing. He's coming off what we expect to be an MVP season, and I just think that at his price, snap it up. I'd be happy paying. Genuinely, I'd pay 2 firsts for Aaron Rodgers in a random Superflex league. I don't think you even need to get close to paying that.
I think if you give a first, you've probably got a deal done.
Yeah, and I think you can probably get him for a late first and a second. Like, if you're a contender and you can go out and spend your, late first and a late second and get Aaron Rodgers, deal done, because I just can't get my head around his current price.
Just a couple more things before we wrap up, just for this part. So Aaron Rodgers, the only time he hasn't been a top 10 quarterback in his career, not in any other time, in his career, is when he started less than 15 games. And that has been, since he's been the starter, that has been 2 seasons where he started 7 games and 9 games. Obviously, he was the backup to Brett Favre to start with. Everyone knows that story if you've watched the NFL at all. But he's played 15 and 16 games every other season, and he's always been the QB 9 or above. That is his worst season when he's played a full season or close to. I think if you're paying a late first and a second to get that value. The other thing that I wanted to touch on with you before we wrap up here, what are you thinking for if he goes somewhere else? Because there's obviously rumours that he's going to get traded. To me, personally, I don't care where he goes. I don't think he's going to a worse situation than Green Bay. I don't think he'd accept that trade. He'd just sit out and would let the trade go through. Equally, if he goes if Green Bay does get him somewhere better, I know the Denver Broncos have been a candidate. I know there was reports about the Titans. He said that he wanted to be, or he was open to being a Titan in a trade. They're not worse situations. If they're better situations, and he makes those teams better. Imagine him going to the Tennessee Titans, having Derrick Henry, so you have to stack the box against him. But then if you stack the box, you've got Aaron Rodgers, who will tear you apart on any blitz that you send at him. I just don't see a worse situation than what he's currently in now.
There isn't one. He wouldn't leave. He holds all the cards.
That's my point.
He's not leaving to a worse situation. So to me, the situation will only be better than what he currently has in Green Bay. But before we wrap it up, I've just had a message from one of our patrons that I thought was so fantastic I had to share it. So shout out to Gary Atkinson. He's at GaryAcko17 on Twitter. So he's just sent me. So over the last 10 years, this is the top 12 fantasy QBs broken down by age. Okay,
coming in clutch, Gary.
So it's broken down by each year. So age 23 comprises of 11% of the top 12 seasons over the last 10 years. Age 25 is third with 10% of the age of the top 12 seasons. Age 35 plus is responsible for 21% of the age of the top 12 QB seasons.
Okay,
yes, a large proportion of that is because we've had Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady and that producing fantasy seasons. But as I said, Aaron Rodgers was a top 5 QB this year. If you only look at the first 17 games, despite the fact he missed a game and was age 38, why do we think that his arm's suddenly going to fall off at age 39? I'm all in on Aaron Rodgers for one more year.
The thing to add to that point of 35 plus is if you think about how many 22 to 24 year olds come into the league compared to how many quarterbacks actually make it to 35 plus, they're vastly different numbers. So you have a much higher percentage of success within those populations at the higher level, but you probably have a very small portion of the 22 to 24 year olds actually making it to 35 plus. If you're not elite, then you don't get to that level. You probably retire or you become a backup at that point. So yeah, I'm all with you on Aaron Rodgers, Rich.
Awesome. Well, that concludes part 1 of the pod. Hope you stay with us. As I said, we've got a fantastic guest lined up to talk through 3 more Dynasty buys. But if you're watching live, we'll see you again next week.